Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10 Count Podcast. I'm your host, Andre. Tonight's going to be a Raw review, and that's Raw for today, Monday. Basically, it was a pretty okay show. It wasn't an A plus show, but I would give it maybe a B plus, B minus, because it did have some pretty good matches and some pretty good promo segments. So let's dive right in. They opened the show with a promo between Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker, Paul Heyman in the ring, talking about how they are the future, how they're basically trying to change the wrestling business for themselves. And then, of course, somebody interrupted, which the person that interrupted was Sami Zayn. And he basically did his promo where he was calling Seth Rollins a hypocrite because he was saying that he was pissed about how Roman Reigns, about how CM Punk's status was. And Sami Zayn was like, look, basically what it comes down to, I think you're just jealous because they're in a position that you wanted to be in. So what it kind of came down to is Seth Rollins told Sami Zayn, look, I'm going to give you a choice. And the choice is you can either roll with us, support us, be with us, or we can give you an out, which basically means you get transferred to SmackDown, saying that Heyman can arrange that, and he gave him until the end of the night to decide. Alright, so with that being the case also, throughout the night we saw various Sami Zayn segments. Of course, him supposedly thinking about what he's going to do, whether he's going to go to SmackDown and get a media championship match from the winner of Randy Orton and John Cena, or is he going to stay on? And they basically said, look, if you stay here, you're basically going to be a target because I know you're not going to support us in what we're trying to do. All right, so then they cut the commercial and went to their first match, which was Rhea Ripley versus Roxanne Perez. Basically, the match itself was, I would give that match maybe a B minus because there was some good wrestling going on in that match, but it was still basically finished the way that you would think that it would finish, a predictable finish. Rhea Ripley won the match by disqualification because Julia from NXT came in and basically they was jumping Rhea Ripley, and then Io Sky came running down, and of course, like I said, the match had a predictable flop of a finish, but okay. Like I said, I would give that match a B minus, B plus. Then, of course, the next segment that they had there was a segment between Logan Paul and Jey Uso, where that was pretty much a setup segment where Logan Paul is trying to go after Jey Uso for the World Heavyweight title, which, again, setup segment. And they in the ring talking, Jey telling Logan Paul about how, look, I just got rid of Gunther. I was doubting myself with Gunther, but I beat him and became the World Heavyweight Champion. And if you think that you're just going to come along some flash in the pan and take this title from me, that ain't going to happen. So, of course, setup match for Backlash, which they didn't make official on the show, but I'm quite sure that they will make it official. Then, of course, the next segment was the second match, which was the Judgment Day, JD McDonough and Finn Balor versus the War Raiders, which we had the New Day on commentary for that match as well, which it was a pretty wild match. I would give it a solid B because it was a pretty wild match with people getting through on the New Day, and in the end, the War Raiders won, even though Carlito tried to interfere in the match a couple times, but the War Raiders won that match. And then the very next segment, we had Becky Lynch coming down to explain her actions on why she turned heel, why she turned on Lyra Valkyria, and she's saying how she's been fighting Bayley for the last 9 years or so, and that basically Bayley's been her enemy, but then Lyra Valkyria was teaming with her enemy to go after the tag title, so she's the one that took out Bayley from the WrestleMania tag match. And then, of course, Lyra Valkyria came down and she was talking about how she idolized Becky Lynch, how Becky trained her, taught her the ropes, and Becky was basically the one that she looked up to. Then Becky stabbed her in the back. And, of course, this is also a setup segment because they're actually setting up a match between those two for the Women's Intercontinental title at Backlash. Again, it was a pretty good segment. Those two, they broke out fighting, and Becky ran off, but then when Lyra Valkyria was at the top of the ramp, Becky came back and hit her in the back and knocked her down cold. So that match is probably going to happen at at Backlash. And then our next segment was the Rusev promo, which him talking about he's glad to be back. He's pretty much going to be teaching people what he learned while he was away. And he has a match next week as well, which they did set up a match between Penta and JD McDonough for next week. So that should be a pretty interesting match. Then we had Stephanie Bakir versus Ivy Nile, which this was probably, to me, the only A match on the whole night, because those two ladies was in there wrestling. They was in there doing some pretty good, pretty sharp wrestling moves, and I really do like that, the fact that they actually let the ladies get in there and actually wrestle, which WWE is starting to get a budding women's division, which Stephanie Bakir ended up winning that match. Then our next segment was Pat McAfee hopping on the announce table and basically telling everybody about how the situation with Gunther, telling everybody about who he is, how he's always been in life, about how he's a stand-up guy and all that. Then he got to the point where he was like, look, if I ride with you, I ride with you regardless of what's what, regardless of who you are. If I ride with you, I ride with you. And then he turned to Cole and was like, this man right here, Michael Cole, I ride with this man. So when Gunther came out and started picking on Cole, I had to step up and look out for my man. So then he calls out Nick Aldis, and Nick Aldis is like, okay, I am the acting GM tonight because Adam Pearce has off. So you called me out here. What you want? Pat McAfee was like, look, I want Gunther. So Nick Aldis was like, I can't give you Gunther because I need to make sure that two of my greatest assets is actually not hurt. So instead, Nick Aldis gave them a match at Backlash, Gunther versus Pat McAfee, which I do want to see that match. I'm not expecting too much of it, but I do want to see that match to see how they do the story for that match as well. Then we got to the final segment of the night, where Seth Rollins is in the ring. He calls out Sami Zayn. They're talking heart to heart about how long they've been friends, about basically Seth calls Sami first, one of the first people that he called when his daughter was born, because Sami had just had a kid too. He didn't know what to do. So he reiterated, look, Sami, I know you're not going to support what we're trying to do here, so take the out, go to SmackDown, and take whatever deal that Heyman sets up for you. Of course, Sami was like, nah, I ain't doing that. And with that being the case, here comes Paul Heyman with Braun Breaker. They have a match, which that you would call that a borderline squash match because Breakker was giving it to him. Breakker was really giving it to him, even including basically spearing Sammy 4 times, which again, that was a borderline squash match to me. Then of course the show goes off. But I do want to see what happens with the storyline with this, and I do want to see what happens with the Becky and Lyra storyline as well, because they have the makings to be some very, very interesting stories to be told there. Now, what I also want to do is I want to say thank you to everybody that watched my show, and I want to say thank you to everybody that commented. I want you to continue to comment. Tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me where I can be better. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button on my channel as well. I appreciate everybody's love and support. And until next time, thank you very much. This is the 10 Count. I'm Andre, your host.